And we're live. Woo!
Yes. Hello.
Hey, kids. This is Ivan, kids. Hey, kids. Yeah, I don't know my intro anymore, but hey, kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? But here we're chatting with Jason, Dark Age of Roleplay Games, and because we're going to be playing Hollow Earth Expedition soon.
Yep, right here.
And so, what I just ordered, like the set. You know,
okay.
Made some money. Made some good money doing some gigs, and I figured, well, I treat myself and buy the set. So the set's on its way from, I think it's Studio 2 Publishing.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, you know, nothing like earning money doing what you love to do, and then being able to spend that money on something you love to do.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Now, if they pay me,
that's the meaning of life, right there. If you can do it.
Game, I can buy set. Yeah, I could buy them. Great, but I'm not going to hold my breath. Not going to hold my breath on that. So yeah, so both of us ended up doing videos about some of the mistakes we made so far in Ubiquity.
Oh yeah, yeah. Have to. We have to be able to learn and critique ourselves. We have to be able to share our experiences so other people out there who aren't as uninhibited as us hopefully can see those videos and say, oh, good. So I'm not the only idiot out there, right? I'm not the only one that botches it, right? I mean, that's part of why I came on here, to share the experiences, you know, and certainly to let people know that they're playing the wrong games.
Exactly.
I saw Anthony's video yesterday saying, be aware of the rules, some simple reminders about RPG a day. And I went, uh-oh. I read all of the questions when he posted them a few weeks ago. None of those appear to me as if you could answer those negatively, but I guess there are guys out there that could. But I saw that and I said, what's considered negative? There are people who
game sucks.
Well, but there's no question asking that.
Right.
But, you know, some people just look at me and don't like me, and think I'm negative. So, you know, no matter what I say, they may decide bad.
Yeah, well, just, you know, smile when you say it, I suppose. Smile.
That's not hard for me. That's not hard for me.
Actually, I have to make a video promoting that, because I never actually participated in RPG a day. I actually answered last year's questions late. I have a few videos where I just kind of like go bowl through the questions a little bit. This year's questions I'm really excited to answer. The funny thing though is I'm looking at a lot of these questions and I did not play the vast amount of games that other people have. So
neither have I.
So some of them I'm thinking, man, I don't know if I'm qualified. I'm qualified, but the range of games I can kind of draw from is a little bit smaller.
It is. You know, I was looking through them again this morning and said, man, I'm not ashamed of it. I like what I like. I like what I've played. But yeah, I mean, just his video, he goes through what, 150 games, and I thought, what? I didn't even know these games existed, you know. So I certainly haven't played them. So and let's face it, Ivan, until Ubiquity and Savage Worlds and the Phage system for me, the Age system, I still played the same game. It was just a different version of the same game for 30 years.
Right.
D20 of some type, right? So I'm not ashamed of that. Hell, I like what I like. But you're right. I'm going to have my answers to most of those questions may all come from the same ballpark. You and I may be redundant. So maybe I should do day 1, you do day 2, I do day 3. I'll do the odd days, you do the even days. We'll just kind of be redundant.
There you go. That would work. That would work.
At least you got a nice jump start on me here with Ubiquity.
Yeah, you know, well, this is a great segue into this part, you know, as far as making mistakes, because I think you mentioned in your video too, that like we play these games for a long time. So if I play something like Astonishing Swordsman and Sorcerers of Hyperborea, the differences are little. I mean, sometimes they can be significant in terms of how the game feels, but if you woke me up out of a dead sleep and said, go play one of these games or go run it, I could do it, you know. And every once in a while I have to look down and figure, oh, okay, well, this is how I handle this mechanic here, or this one thing, but that's about it.
Yeah.
And actually,
minor details.
It's funny. I was talking to Anthony the other day, and it was more about. I actually want to talk to him some more about this, but about the motivations for playing lighter rule sets, because, you know, for the most part, I like rules light, up to rules medium, and that's about it. Like actually, Ubiquity is probably for me the top of my comfort zone, where it starts to get, you know.
I agree. 100%.
Right.
And I've been trying, you know, for 2 weeks, because I made a video talking about how I'm highlighting it.
Right.
And it's not complicated. What it is, it's how do you say it nicely? It's not necessary. Some of it, right? It doesn't have to be that detailed. So I was thinking, how could I make a video trying to compare this to, let's say D&D, let's say basic fantasy. The number of talents, the number of skills in this book are equal to the number of spells in those books. So you'd say, okay, it'd be like trying to memorize all the spells from basic fantasy. The difference is those spells only come up when somebody's a magic user and actually needs to use the spell. In something like this, you could end up with a table of 6 players with all kinds of different skills, and you need to know those as a GM. So that's what makes this thicker for me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it's been a I mean, that's a good analogy as far as the spells and the talents and whatnot is, because I think I even counted up in basic fantasy there's like 106 spells, something like that, and some of those are like duplicates, the duplicate cleric magic user spells. But yeah, I mean, it took the first time I read through the talents in the first game, I'm like, oh my god, I was just freaking out for a second. But it is a little bit like, it's like when they come up and play. Like, I mean, I keep on trying to remember, like, when I was a kid and thumbing through those books for the first time, and you're looking at, like, Otto freezing spear, and you're like, what the hell is that? I mean, now I know what it is. I don't have to, yeah, you throw a little thing to pawn play, bonk, But at the time, you're looking at the apparatus of Qualish. What the hell is this crap? In the magic items. Right. Now I say it, and people know what it is, but because, like, as a kid, I stared at those books for hours, and we played the games. So, that's part of the learning curve. But I remember at some point I'm talking to Anthony and talking about the motivations for liking a small rule set, and we came up with a few, like more than one. But one of them was having a list of rules. Like for me, like, I like to know all the rules. I like to understand all the rules. I like to be able to use them. I don't want to mess up.
Right.
In whatever game I play. And especially as a game master, I've talked about this a lot, but I never really thought about it in this way. Like, there's a lot of games I'm okay as a player in. Like, I would go play in a 5e game. Yep. If a good enough friend had a Pathfinder game and I thought the premise was interesting, I'd grit my teeth and I'd play in it. But I'm not running it.
That's right. It's exactly me, 100%. Yeah.
But part of the reason I'm not running it is because, to me, I'm not comfortable because I don't know all the rules, and I'm also thinking, well, the payoff for me to know all the rules probably isn't that great.
No, and I don't want to bash a game like Pathfinder, but we don't have to be geniuses to look at level 10 and how the game evolves versus level 10 in basic fantasy or Lamentations of the Flame Princess. Those games significantly get more tactical, more math, more bloated. I guess I hate to use that term, but they do. They just get more complicated, right?
Right.
And I look at basic fantasy, which is 3.5 simplified.
Right. Well.
And I basically I say, well, why would I play Pathfinder when I can take basic fantasy and achieve the exact same types of narrative and types of games with other role players that why would I pick Pathfinder when I can just do it with White Box or basic fantasy, right? So it's my old argument. Again, is the game worth the candle? Am I going to burn up this candle? For this game? And that's the question, And I think we're both in agreement with that. If you said to me, let's play Monsters and Magic, I wouldn't first think Pathfinder. I would think White Box. I would think Holmes D&D. I would think basic fantasy, Labyrinth Lore. I would think anything else that's much simpler to get into and go. Iron Falcon, right?
Right. Yeah. So I mean, and for some people the answer is yes, the candle's worth it, and for me the answer is no in terms of that game. So I guess part of what I realized, as I've gone over the learning curve with Ubiquity, is that when you finally learn it, when you finally kind of internalize it, I think I've kind of like gone over this hump where I'm kind of like coasting down the other side. There's some things I don't know, or like I have to remember, or I have to look up in the book more, but I've kind of gotten over that hump. And now it's getting to the point where it's a lot easier, and it kind of comes to me more naturally. And I realize there's not as many rules to memorize as I thought there were, but it gets presented in a different way. It's a part of it. Just it's a totally different mindset. You have to wrap your head around. It's not a D20 roll. It's a die pull. How does this die pull really work?
Right.
You know.
Well, yeah. I mean, you had a great video talking about the probabilities.
Yeah.
You know, see, and you actually talk about the actual numbers, which is brilliant because let's face it, that's what dice are, right? Probabilities, averages. I actually looked at it when I sat down and looked at Ubiquity. I looked at it as successes. It's always a degree of failure, a degree of success. That's incredibly difficult for a guy who plays pass-fail games to conceptualize.
Right.
Right. Now, if you just break it down into probabilities, I go, oh yeah, right. It's like rolling a 1 on a die 6 when they're trying to listen at doors, right?
Right.
But I didn't go into hex thinking of the dice pools in numbers. I looked at it as degrees of success, degrees of failure, and that's kind of an abstract, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that would be my other question, because you said you were talking to Anthony, and I think we got off on Pathfinder, but you were talking to Anthony about something. I think we got kind of sidetracked there. I'm sorry if I did sidetrack.
Oh yeah,
you.
yeah. No, we did. No, that's okay. I probably sidetracked myself, but I mean, the point finally being that, like, for me, the one of the reasons I like a lighter game is I like to be comfortable enough with the rules that I don't have to look them up, and that's probably my primary motivation. Is I don't want to say I hold the rules sacrosanct, but I want to play the game by the rules, and so the less rules there are, the less complicated it is, the easier it is for me to do that.
Right.
And then I can, go ahead and run. I mean, I don't like them to get in the way, but sometimes I don't mind it. Like, depending. Like, I don't mind using rules. Sometimes I think it's kind of fun. Like, I mean, hell, when we were kids, we look at all these alternate rules. Like, I still look at rules. I'm still rules junkie. I look at, like, this is a cooler way to do this. That's one of the reasons there's so many freaking OSR games on my shelf. Is I'm like, oh, that's cool. I use a D12 for this, and this is how he's going to do thief skills. And I'm a rules junkie, but
and that's kind of like a car junkie. I mean, if you love cars, but you might not be a great mechanic, but you can appreciate everything that goes on under the hood of that car. You can grasp it, you can appreciate it, but I don't know if I want to go working on my 765 Mustang. Right? I don't know if I'm the guy to be working on that car. But so I'm in full agreement. I love these books. I love flipping through them. I love going, wow, that's cool. I wonder how that plays out. Like this 13th Age. I read these articles, I see these vids. They talk about these role-playing techniques for a die 20 game, and I'm fascinated. Would it be really different? You don't know until you see it in action, right? Some are just mechanics. Some actually do uninhibit role play, or how do you say that? How am I trying to say it? Like this. I can't say that I role play more in this than I've ever role played in a D20 game. I didn't feel that it was that different, but I haven't had a chance to play a sophisticated campaign over a long period of time where maybe that curve starts to even out at the top, right? I don't know. So when people tell me you can't really role play in D20, it just makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Right? It's like,
if you haven't shaved it off.
Yeah.
If you haven't shaved it off, I shaved mine off, so it's gone.
I do think, and that's my point. So when it comes right down to it, they are mechanics, they are rules, and again, to what end? Like I said, for instance, the system is not relevant to this genre, right? Ubiquity is a shared mechanic for all of the different genres. So if you like the fantasy genre, you've got to find Ubiquity that suits that genre, right? Because first and foremost, you're going to want the kind of genre that you want to play. Now, whether you choose die 20 or 3 die 6, like the Dragon Age, Fantasy Age, or whether you choose Ubiquity, I think first and foremost it starts with genre, and then you got to decide how different is Ubiquity and Desolation, for example, than say D20 in Lamentations of the Flame Princess. I can't think of another post-apocalyptic D20 game outside of Gamma World, and I don't think Gamma World's D20, is it? But does that make sense?
Yeah, I get it. I mean, I think the more I played Ubiquity, the more I've gotten wrap my head around the fact that it really suits like pulp pretty well. Like, I mean, like, and that was, help me out here. The game we're talking about, Hollow Earth Expedition. That was the first game. That's Combos actually, wrote the system, and it really does kind of helps like the pulpy feel. Like, I mean, we didn't play enough in that game where we really started earning style points by acting like our character.
Right.
Because I mean, once you get into a rhythm with that's where the game really starts to kind of come alive, and I'm just starting to get okay with that, where you start to act. How what your character's motivations are. Sometimes you get yourself in trouble by doing what your character does, and sometimes what you end up doing is you do some really cool stuff, you know, like, I mean, and you learn style points doing that. So it's kind of like this economy, you know, back and forth, and that's what really starts to kind of to blossom.
And I think that's been the number one hang up for me when I came back. It wasn't even these games that were fat with rules. It was this idea that you needed a rule to make it okay to do cool stuff. And I used to think, gosh, I'd let my players all the time at a table in D20 and old school D&D. If a guy thought up something cool and he narrated this thing, and I would say, wow, that's great. Roll your dex. You're on wet surface. Dex -2, right? Or dex +2 if they were trying to roll under. I would just make up that rule for them to achieve or fail cool stuff. Then you come along and you say, yeah, but we're going to make it a rule that you have to have these things to do cool stuff. I think that has been the number one obstacle for me with games outside of the simple game. So when I talk about rules simple, for me, it's versatile. There's a handful of rules that must be followed, and everything else can be, I can find a way to create the rule and adjudicate it on the fly, and everyone at the table understands why we're doing it. And I can do that with a simple make a dex check. Everyone knows instantly, oh, we're trying not to fall down in the oil, right? I mean, it just doesn't take more than that. So when somebody says, yeah, but we need a rule for that. We need to make sure you're allowed to do that. Wait a second, you're allowed to do that. It's just I turn it into a dex check. I turn it into 1-on-2, roll low on die 6. The idea that the rules don't exist in old D&D, it's not true. They're right there. They're in 6 attribute scores. I don't need focuses in D&D 5e under strength. I don't need to be told that busting doors is under strength. Duh, right?
Right. No, I get what you're saying.
It's right there. So when somebody says, yeah, but now we got something that has all these things where you can do cool stuff. Well, you still do cool stuff in D20, but you got to have a DM. And now we're getting down to it. You got to have that GM who's able to think that way or is able to let go of control and allow the players the freedom to maybe come up. You know, Big Mike's always coming up in our D&D games with these amazing things. And I say, great, Mike, make a roll. And at the end of the night, the other night, Mike had this thing, and I said, go ahead, make the roll. He made the roll. He made the first roll. He failed the second roll. He said, oh, man. And at the end of the night, he said something about it. And I said, well, Mike, it's just an attack roll. You know, I just took everything you said and boiled it down into beat AC. It's that simple. If you beat AC, then we make another check. If you fail that, then I'm not worried about the other check, right? And that's freedom, even in D&D 5e that I had with Mike the other night. I just basically said, make an attack roll. You know, it's that simple. So I think it is in ubiquity, but you have to know it as well as we know D20. That's what we're talking about, right? It's fluency.
Yeah. There's that fluency with the system where you finally start to get, you know. And I've kind of, like I said, I kind of gotten just over the hump now where I realize, okay, well, this, you know, when I'm asking him to do something, yeah, I can still apply some sensibility to it and say, okay, well, just, you know, make an acrobatics check here, make an athletics check, and or you know, or you know, if the player says I want to, you know, apply style to that, you know, it's like, I mean, applying style in some cases, like say you could do something on the average, you know, but say I'm making a roll, like literally it was a more cinematic moment or a more clutch moment when Francois said, okay, you're going to climb up this wall. Okay, roll dice. And I could have made it on the average, you know, but he's like, no, roll dice. This is important. This is one of those things where if you fail, it's kind of interesting, you know, and if you succeed, it's kind of interesting. So it's one of those moments of like, okay, now it's time to roll dice, you know, in regards to whether it's D20 or ubiquity. A lot of times you're like, yeah, you have that much dexterity. Don't worry about it. Don't roll, you know, go ahead. Or your climb skill is that good, you know, don't worry about it. Now it's like, oh, this it's really important if you get up there or don't get up there. So you're going to roll. But, you know, in a case of like, let's say like I could have hit it with the average, I have about 65% chance of success. If I spend a couple style points, now I'm looking at like 85. If I spend 4, now I'm looking like 94. And this is representing me like really putting my all into it, you know. I don't have to spend the style points. But when it's like super important to me, yeah, then this represents my character really like, you know, putting his all into it. And if I succeed, I mean, I can narrate it in however cool way I want to. And a lot of times, like, you know, a good game master like Anthony kind of told me and demonstrated, like, oh, I'll chuck them right back to you, or at least most of them.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, yeah, the player agency, the player control is in the style points. In D&D, a player says, I want to do this, and a DM just says arbitrarily, well, you got a 25% chance. Roll a 1 out of 4 for me, or make your dex check. Well, they still were leaving it up to the dice with no potential advantage for the player, right? And style points become the potential advantage in ubiquity, right? The player can say, you know what, I understand I have to take a challenge here, but I'm gonna be Indiana Jones on this one, man. I'm gonna whip it and I'm gonna whip it and rip it, right? And so they're gonna spin their 4 style to guarantee they do the Indiana Jones, the perfect shot, shooting the guy with the sword, right, in the street.
Right, exactly.
Putting down the guy with the sword, right? That amazing moment in Raiders of the Lost Ark. And you say, okay, in D&D, it's like we're making an attack roll. That's it? Oh, shit. I mean, what's different, right?
Right. I mean, it's funny. Like, I've thought about gaming now, and like now that I've kind of wrapped my head more around it, I wouldn't make a hybrid of like, you know, say OSR D20 and the Ubiquity, but there's moments where I've thought it'd be really cool to play a game in this genre. And you know, I'd love to play it like, you know, like say, you know, D20, but like, man, I wish I could use, you know, I wish it did this like Ubiquity. Or like, I mean, I like the way some of the skill sets work. I've become more enamored with it. Like I said, yeah, I wouldn't hybridize them because I don't think there's a perfect game out there anywhere. But I've gained more of an understanding or an appreciation for how that works. I mean, the other thing too is like, once I started wrapping my head around like how the die pool worked and like, you'll notice like everything like advantages or disadvantages like tactically when you say, okay, you know what, I want to do this, but I'm not going to use style points. I'm going to use this special climbing rope, or I'm going to get the high ground in this fight. A lot of times you'll get bonuses or penalties in 2, so you'll get +2 or +4 or +6, and that's because every 2 dice equals a potential success. I mean, on average.
Right. You have to have 2 to get 1.
Yeah, so it's, I mean, you can get 1, but it counts only for so much. So you start, after a while, you know, like in D&D, you can start to kind of eyeball, and somebody says, okay, I want to do this, but I'm going to hide behind this rock. And you're like, okay, you get +2, you know, you start just, you can, you know, after a while, you can naturally just assign modifiers to everything. At first, in Ubiquity, I was kind of like, well, how do I do that? And then after a while, you start to realize, oh yeah, well, +2 is actually kind of a big deal.
Right.
You know, +4 is a really +4 is a really big deal.
It is.
Because that point you're talking about
I noticed in Ubiquity, they're more willing to hand out the -2s and the -4s than they are the +2s and the +4s, right? Because you're already.
It depends, yeah.
You are in a way,
yeah,
you know, in Ubiquity already. I mean, in Hex, you're above average. You're above average already, right?
You know what I've run into it a little bit so far in gaming is I think it's for me and some other players sometimes not thinking tactically enough and like not using the environment. So I say, you know, somebody said, well, I want to do this. And I realized, well, dude, this is a really bad situation. You know, you're going to get this -4 penalty. I think we've ran, at least in the games I've played so far, we've ran into that where we're just trying to do things that are a little bit harder based on the environment or the situation. And I found that like myself and some of the other people I play with have a lot of times less time said, hey, but I want to do this. I want to do something that's tactically advantageous, you know.
Right.
And you know, I appreciate the fact that the game has. This is one of those parts where I'm just starting to get into it. Like it's kind of like learning how to play D&D, but not knowing all the modifiers and not knowing all the little doohickeys that say like first edition, and then you go back, you throw out the speed factor because that was crazy, you know. And
nuts. Yeah.
But it's those moments where all of a sudden you realize you have these examples of like what would give you modifiers, and you start to realize, okay, yeah, this would give a +2, you know, if a guy's you know playing smart.
Oh, exactly. And again, I always reward my players in any version of any game if they are creative and if they're thinking outside swing sword, and they're not. I mean, that's the whole point. That to me is part of role playing. I mean, the whole idea of that is if you were in this room, in this environment, what would you do? You wouldn't think, man, you know, I got to roll an 18 or up here. No, you would just do what you think you need to do to better your chances. Grab the door, use it as a shield. Grab a meat shield, use it to take arrows. Awesome, do it. Now, some books have those rules for you to follow. Some don't. We got to come up with them. And I'm comfortable with that. When I go into a new game system, because I know every game system is flexible enough for me to tweak or change, what you don't want to do is for me, I don't want to play games like Ubiquity here without playing it rules as written, because you're going to play with players that have read the book and players who expect a certain understanding of that. So you don't want to tweak this game first day out. I don't anyway. And therefore, you find yourself saying, well, I'm more intimidated to just play this as written than I would be in, say, white box, right? Which I would be tempted to stop on Monday night and say, what did you say, Anthony? You want to do what? You know, I'd probably just ask Anthony so we don't waste a lot of time. We'd be flipping through the book, right? And hopefully I won't have to ever flip through the book. But you're going to want to flip through the book to make sure I don't do something wrong, right? With his dual wield choice or his flurry choice or whatever. So in D&D, in old D&D, there's no such thing. The guy says, I want to use 2 weapons. Fine. It's still 1 attack roll.
Right. Oh, yeah. No,
there's no rule for it.
Right. No, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
And that is part of my issue too, is tactical thinking. Some guys are always thinking, if they come from Pathfinder, guys are always thinking, how do I get more bonuses? And at some point, like, whoa, they aren't there. They're just not there. You just got to see this as an imaginative space, and you're not always going to get more bonuses.
Right.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. You were going to say?
Let's see. What was I? I was going to say something really intelligent. Oh yeah, but that was the fun thing so far. It's like, the neat thing so far is like in the roundtable game that we've played, it was interesting to see like just how kind of Anthony like kind of laid back and let every game master sort of like interpret things, and then he'd step in. Like if you asked him, hey, what am I doing here? Because there is some wiggle room. Like I've really kind of come to appreciate with this particular system. And there's other systems out there, I believe, that allow you to do this, but it kind of gives you some more modern stuff. Like, I mean, you have the skill system, you have this weird like in-game currency style, which I generally do not like stuff like that in games. This one I've become more enamored with. But you still can apply a lot of like old school sensibility. Like you can adjudicate things one way or another. You can kind of decide, even to the point where you've got like these 35 skills, and a player says they give you their intention. Why I want to do this, and then you can be like, well, okay, well, what skill are you going to use to do that? And but you can start to make arguments for like, you know, are you going to use some kind of intimidation, or are you going to use some kind of diplomacy?
And you would have, with many players we're accustomed to playing with, you would have to do that.
Right.
As a DM, we would almost have to say, well, that's going to be an intimidation check. Oh, that's going to be your history lore, or that's, I hate to say it, but the habits that come from a game like 4E, Pathfinder, 5E, there are habits that are developed by players there that you don't need in OD&D. You don't see guys of our ilk show up at a 5E table saying, waiting to be told what we can do, and we certainly don't show up saying, where's my skill for that? You and I just say, I'm going to go over and check these runes out. I expect the DM then to say, well, you can't read the runes, or you know what, you could read the runes if your intelligence is this. But in D and 5E, there's this kind of apprehension, well, what do I use? Or they want to tell you, well, I want to use this. That's it. Even in D20, we've seen the evolution of the player different than what you and I grew up doing, and different than how you and I even now play, I think. We still don't play that way. I'd venture to guess, if I sat next to you at a D&D 5E game, you would not be playing like the players that I sit with at D&D 5E. You and I would play totally different. Although it wouldn't affect the game, but we would be more willing to just act, less willing to wait and be told, well, use your intimidation.
Right. No, I see what you're saying. like, I mean, you kind of do things until like you sort of hit the wall. I mean, you know, part of what a mistake I mentioned where like I was calling for too many rolls sometimes. Like as a novice game master playing this, I keep looking at the skill list and looking at their skill list and say, okay, what would apply here? And I started to realize a lot of times you just don't have to do that. I mean, but it's one of those things, you see it. It's like you see a bunch of controls. You see all these buttons. I got to push them, right? You know, and then you're kind of like lay back and realize a lot of it now. Like when I think about the characters that I've had, you know, and Philippe's the one that has, you know, I've had the longest. But I even just think about Spencer. I started realizing that those skill lists that I made for him, a lot of times that just told me who he was and what he was good at. We weren't necessarily always going to be rolling dice for that.
That's right.
But it's kind of like this guy's a con man. This guy is a jack of all trades. It just means he's sort of really good at everything a little bit. He can get by, and he's overconfident, so he thinks he's better than he is at everything. But he's the guy that's not. He's the guy. I had a friend that like fixed his own transmission one time, and I was like, Dave, what made you think you could fix your transmission? And he goes, a person built this. Mechanics are people. I'm a person too.
Yeah,
and like right. he was Spencer Halliday. He would just walk around. Yeah, I could do that too. Now Spencer might end up in like surrounded by hundreds of parts covered in grease. You know, still thinking he could do this.
I want to see that one.
Right. But you know,
that's awesome.
And he could probably at least con you or into thinking he could do it for 15 minutes. So it was more about looking at that and realizing that, like, in real life, this guy, of course, this guy can try to do all these other things he's not particularly good at. You know, just like Chuck could. It doesn't mean Chuck has no empathy, or or he can't do anything about people, or no linguistic skill or whatever. It just means, like, as tasks start to get harder,
right,
then now it's time to, like, say, hey, I think, how are you going to do that? And sometimes it's not even a role. It's just sort of like, maybe the game master will say, well, okay, well, that's probably going to be your athletics or your strength, and like, as a player, you could say, well, can I use my acrobatics, because I have an acrobatic skill? They're like, okay, well, how are you going to use it? I'm like, oh, and you kind of like demonstrate, or you say, okay, well, I'm going to use my acrobatics. It's like, oh, that makes sense.
Right. Right. And that is, for me, one of the things I loved about this the first time I read it was this idea of taking averages. I love that, because I hate rolling dice. I mean, I love the purity and the truth and the fate of dice. So I think the dice need to have that kind of impact. So when I say I hate rolling dice, what I mean is I want to roll the dice, but the dice need to be dramatic. Things need to hinge on those dice. So I hate using dice for just perception checks, et cetera, unless it's truly a challenge. So I love the idea of taking averages in this. I think that is fantastic. I'm like, that is very cool. Now here's the challenge. I'm the GM. I've got 12 pages of stuff prepared for you guys. Again, I do not writing it, just preparing scenarios in which you guys will do what you do. But you have, and I'm going to go into this blind. I haven't seen your characters. You guys haven't written backgrounds. I haven't seen any character sheets. I don't know what your skills are. I don't know if I'm planning on seeing those, if you guys are going to send me those. But if you don't, I'm literally going to go in Monday night totally blind. I won't have seen your characters. $5.
Yeah. Character, yeah. I'm actually, yeah.
And so I'm okay with that, because that doesn't bother me, because I'm an old school guy. I never, half the time I was like, I don't want to hear about your character. Let's hear about your character when we get to the table, when your character actually does something that's relevant to the game. So I'm okay with that. But for instance, if I'm designing a particular scenario where you might have to flip the switch to avoid the trap, if I set that difficulty at 2, and nobody in the party has a particular skill and they don't have enough average, then we end up in a situation where either I've set it too high based on averages, or so how do I build those scenarios and not either put it too difficult or too easy? And that's been a fascinating dilemma for me as a GM, now looking at this as a guy designing the game. If like in D&D, if you design a trap, it's something simple like they have a 1 in 2 chance on a dice 6 to see the tripwire, or a thief has a 1 in 4 chance, whatever, right? But once they trigger that trap, basically they take a dart to the forehead. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, sometimes in the new games, they say, well, they can make a dex check to take half damage, or whatever the case may be, right? You start to soften the blow a little bit. But in something like this, and we have, I have a scenario, cliffhanger scenarios that you've got to be able to figure your way out of. How difficult do I make the cliffhanger scenario when it comes to a skill check, right? So, do I just make it based on what I think, right?
Make it difficulty 7. Impossible. You just destroyed his computer, ladies and gentlemen. It's all over. Yeah, they just spit everything out. That's great. But
so, from a GM designer, those are fascinating dilemmas for me. I'm actually, this is the funny thing. The game I played in, when I play totally different than I GM. Because when you're GMing, you're actually designing these particular events, scenarios, atmosphere, whatever the case may be. I don't railroad even in D20. I basically set it up and let the players tell me what they want to do. But you got to have something. And so doing it this last 2 weeks, has it been a week? Has it been 2 weeks since we played? I've been doing it. I had to put on my DM hat. So when I played, it was player hat. All I have to do is show up with the character, understand basically what my character can do, and let Runeslinger give me a scenario, and me and Ivan I'll get into my character, and I'm going to play this Chuck guy to the hilt. And that's what I do. I could have known the rules a little better. I could have retained some stuff a little better. I should have certainly known that flurry was a waste of time. I could have beaten that snake to death without flurrying. That never dawned on me until you told me in our IM, you could have done 4 points more damage to that snake if you just did your normal brawl. Never crossed my mind that the flurry hurt me more than it, because I forget that your success rolls are also your damage rolls. That's the other thing we don't have in D&D. You roll die 20 to hit, then you roll your damage. Well, your
Right.
success dictates damage in this. It's like, holy, oh yeah, right. I have 8 brawl. I get to roll
Right.
8 dice. So if I get 6 successes, I may have pummeled that snake 2 points more than his stun, 2 points more than his strength, 2 points more than his health. I don't know.
Yeah.
But by
He
doing
still gets to make a defense roll, but yeah.
well,
still
yeah,
gets to make
right.
Yeah.
But the point is, you forget that success is also the damage that's applied.
Right.
In D20, it's totally 2 different things, two different animals, to hit and damage. That was the biggest trick to get my head around as a player. Now, as a GM, I'm looking at everything differently. What skills might these guys have? How much do I waste time writing details? Because I don't like writing details. I like providing scenarios. You guys come up with the details, hopefully. But anyway, so it's been fascinating to put on the GM hat for this now too.
Yeah.
I've decided in the week and a half I've been putting on the GM hat. I actually hate ubiquity.
It's it takes what it is.
Kidding.
It takes a different. I think in D20, like one of the things we're used to is, I mean, it's really easy to just say, like, I mean, there's two or three classic things we've done, because it's not even really. I really think it's more OSR. Like, it's like first OSR thing is like how many in 6 chance. Okay, this is a 3 in 6 chance. Okay, 5 in 6 chance, 1 in 6 chance. That's generally our first go to it when we were kids, and still I love that one. And then there's like the percentage chance. Okay, take out the percentage dice. Anybody can understand that. Okay, if they have a 50%, 5% chance of fixing this trap, or like removing this trap, or whatever the hell it is. Notice being able to disable the bomb, whatever the hell it is you want to talk about. That's really easy. Now in something like this, now you're looking at like difficulties, and you're thinking, well, how do I set this difficulty number from 1 to 6, or whatever. And 6 is insane. And probably the easiest way to look at it is to start, like 1 is easy, and it's fuzzy. They give you these words like, what does difficult and what does hard mean? What's the difference? And part of the thing is you start to look at the average of these die pools. You say if a guy's got a skill of 4, that means he can reliably do a task of 2. Like a six die pool is starting to get kind of big. Like, I mean, and then like a 8 die pool, and that's generally what you put in, like what your character is really good at.
Right.
That means this guy can do hard stuff. I mean, nobody out of the gate has 10 dice in a pool and is able to do tasks of 5 or 6 without spending style points, or being a Hail Mary pass, or doing something to get advantage, like having somebody, you start to have to look at the synergy rules, like can somebody, with a 4 die pool help somebody else. And then a situation like that, so you've got something that you've got to diffuse, or whatever. I think character, depending who the character is, somebody might try to apply their demolitions, a skill to it if they've got that. Somebody else might try to apply science to it. Somebody might try to apply. I'm looking else here. Got maybe like warfare. I mean, something they who knows? And like, well, okay, we'll describe how you're using that skill to defuse this bomb, and then it's kind of like on. So there is this part of ubiquity where it's a little fuzzy. So it's not just, okay, well, the thief has removed traps, nobody else has removed traps. Oh, the thief died two rooms back. With Cervantes was a thief, we're screwed. Now here, at least anybody can have a chance. I mean, they may suck at it, but you can I think the point is, I mean, outside of learning like how to figure out what the difficulty numbers are, is people have several different paths they can take towards.
Well, that's also a reflection on the classless system. There's no class here, so the healer's the healer in D&D, the thief's the thief in D&D. So we got classes that again, I like classes. I've said this before, because I like everybody having to come to the table, with a roll. They're not all able to cast spells. That's part of my issue with D&D 5e. By level 3, rangers are casting spells and fighters are casting spells. It's like, what? Why would you ever be a wizard? Why not just always be a fighter and wait till level 3 and start casting spells? I mean, what's the point? So what happened to specialization? I'm a fan of specialization, right? You don't want me doing brain surgery on you. You want the guy that's done 12 years of med school and 25 years of surgery to do your brain surgery. You don't want me to be doing your brain surgery. So I like specialization. But I also like the fact that they can customize their character any way they see fit. That is very cool. I mean, I like that. And I like the fact that we are free. Like, even in our game, I was still confused that I couldn't just do. So if you said to me in White Box, you guys are scraped up, you've both taken a couple of bumps, and you said to me, I want to take a moment here, and I'm gonna break out a wound kit, and I want to doctor our choleric. And I would say, okay, that's a point. I would just say straight to you, take a point off, Joe. and you would heal Joe a point. The other night in our thing, I'm thinking, wow, you know, I can't just apply antiseptic to your minor scrapes and bruises. You know, those are hurdles that at the same time we can all do it, but at the same time they're also blocks. Those are blocks that make me say, wow, I couldn't just apply first aid to you with a first aid kit and see an automatic, you know, reduction in your non-lethal damage. So those are things I had to get my head around as a player the other night. That was kind of a surprise.
Yeah,
and that may not be normal. I don't know, but I came away going, that was weird. That was weird for me. I did not anticipate that conversation when I was trying to put first aid on your character.
Yeah, I think the point is too. It's like, once again, you have to look at it like it's your time to do something that's important. Like, anybody can apply first aid to somebody and put some band-aids and whatnot, but somebody that has the medicine skill is actually able to, like, doctor some wounds to the point where they're not going to affect the person anymore.
Right.
Still function, you know. And so, like, I mean, say, right. I mean, I took a buttload of bumps and bruises from rolling around the plane as it fell apart, you know. I mean, anybody can kind of say, okay,
as you landed it perfectly, Halsey.
Yeah, anybody can apply some antiseptic and put some bandages on, but like someone that's really skilled can actually doctor me up to the point where I'm like, okay, well, it still hurts, but I think I'm okay, you know.
Right. Yeah, because I perceive non-lethal damage as something that can be readily healed, versus you've just been shot in the chest.
Yeah, right? I mean,
Ubiquity
really. I mean, it seems for the most part they divide lethal, non-lethal damages. Lethal damages like cuts or like anything where the body's gotten opened up, you know, is lethal.
Right,
you know.
Right.
And I mean, non-lethal can convert to lethal. Like, I mean, if you get beat up enough, then it starts converting at one point at a time. So. You know, bludgeoning weapons aren't quite as dangerous. You can get clubbed up quite a bit. You can get beat up quite a bit. But if you get stabbed a couple times, you're done.
See, and that's funny because, again, I would not have thought of this as a simulationist, but some of those things remind me of simulation, right? You're simulating the difference between a club and a sword. In D&D, no, club and a sword do the same die 6 damage, right? And they can both kill you the same, right? So so those kind of things remind me of simulationist concepts, right? It's that, you know, we do have a difference there. So, but that's nothing wrong with that. I'm just making an observation. It's just it's fascinating. As far as role play, I still think for the most part, player agency is something I've been trying to do, and even in D20, trying to entice players to take a larger role or entice players to be in control of their character. Because I never narrated people's feelings. I never told them. I tell them what they see. Right. I tell them what they smell. But I would never say, Joe, you know, this touches your heart, Joe. That'd be crazy to me to think you would tell somebody that. And I would never tell people what they feel or think, right? So when I hear this player agency conversation, I'm like, what DM was doing that for people? Because the minute your DM tells me that I feel pain for the loss of Joe, I'm going to say, what did you just say?
Right.
No, my character, I'll tell you what my character feels. You just wait a second. So that seems strange to me, but player agency in the sense that you're going to empower them with more mechanical control, I guess, is where I thought this game was going to be different. I don't think it is that different. It's the same concepts. It's just I get to narrate post-roll or pre-roll, or hopefully on our Monday night, I'll just tell everybody, you all make your rolls first, see what you do, then narrate. You know, I think that's going to be the most interesting way to play. But I had to get my mind frame out of that. I wanted to narrate, roll, then narrate. I was doing in our game 2 weeks ago, I was doing the same thing I would do in D20. Narrate, roll, finish, right? Narrate, roll, finish. So that's kind of fascinating, the idea that we just drop the dice, then narrate, whether it's me throwing 5 punches on the snake or 1 big punch or breaking the snake's neck, whatever the case may be. Never dawned on me. Never dawned on me that the successes I could dictate that any way visually I wanted to.
Yeah, that is
cool.
That is
cool.
Yeah, that is very different. That was something I've still, you know, it took me a while to wrap my head around, because, you know, we narrate our attention, and usually at some point, like, you know, the game master, you know, we'd get into a rhythm, and the game master would narrate the result, and you know, be pretty cool. and sometimes you chuckle a little bit. But we all kind of got used to like, okay, well they told me pretty much what they wanted, or the dice roll. Oh, the 8 points of damage. So let me tell you what just happened, buddy. And you get into that. So it's as a game master, and so it is. So at first when I got asked, okay, well, so narrate what that looks like. I'm like, what do you mean? Well, I'm getting better. That's another conceptual part of it. That's taking some time.
Well, definitely we grew up in a world where the DM was a storyteller. They set the stage, we made decisions, they then narrated the result. I can't deny that, but I never had anybody narrate whether I was laughing or crying or what I felt, so that was strange. That's the idea that somebody out there was even doing that. That crosses the line. What's my character? What's your role? So I never had that problem. But yeah, I agree with you though. It's definitely. And even now, I try more to tell my players at the table. We had an example 2 weeks ago in my D&D 5e game, and I just said to Carl, you know who? Name him. Tell me where he's at. What does he do? And so I let Carl invent Carl invent a blacksmith and the name of that place, and they went and talked to the blacksmith, and he was taken aback that I let him right on the fly tell me who this guy is, and tell me where he works, and tell me what he's doing, and how do you know him? And then they all went and talked to the blacksmith. So what he did for me was what I usually do for them, right? I usually say to them, well, there's this blacksmith named Not, and you've overheard him speaking in the tavern. And what happened? They come to you, and they know now that I'm Not, and I'm the blacksmith, and they know that they overheard me say something in the tavern. And the players kick the door in, and they say, you're Not. We heard you talk about the evil captain, right? Tell us where he's at. Okay, that's what happens. Is that not right? But when I handed it to Carl, and I said, no, Carl, you tell me who this guy is. And then they came to me as Not the blacksmith, and it changed the role of whether it was adversarial or whether it was, hey, Not, nice to see you. Saw you at the tavern the other night. You mentioned this captain. I didn't have to come up with any of it. All I had to do was I had to answer the mysteries of what this Not might or might not know. That's when I realized D20 can be done any way that these games can be done, which is where 13th Age opened my eyes to that. 13th Age actually suggests that you don't do anything but pop the monsters. It suggests that you say to the player, what are you guys doing? And they say, well, it's Sunday and it's snowing out. And everybody in the party goes, yeah, that's what's happening. And it's kind of like storyteller, right? They come out and they say, well, we want to go check out this island we heard about of undead creatures. And I go, okay. So tell me more about that. And they're going to ultimately tell me all of the things that the DM would normally do. And then I would just narrate the ship, and then ultimately they get to the castle. They don't know what's behind the castle walls, but the castle's theirs. They've actually told me there's a castle up on the hill. Oh, okay. What's behind those castle walls? Well, you're going to have to go into the castle and find out. And then I spring monsters on it. It changes the role totally. I kind of like that. 13th Age actually says, what if you let the players tell the tale? And I think 7th Sea probably works like that. I've never seen 7th Sea. I've never played 7th Sea. But I think there's a resemblance to that.
I believe in the second edition, there's quite a bit of that. Not so much in the first, but I don't know the second edition. But I think they made quite a. But that's a completely different video. That's a flame war in itself between the first and the second edition people. So
I have noticed that there are two camps on first and second. 7th Sea.
Oh yeah, there are.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Meanwhile, I just avoid 7th Sea altogether. I'm not interested. But I am interested in what happens when we really give player agency, even in D&D, to the players.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely.
Why do I have to tell you where the stable's at? Didn't you pass the stables coming in here? Oh yeah, I did. They're down on the corner. Great. So go to the stables.
Yeah, I think I said in the old school series video. I think it was the last video I did in it. I mean, you can play those games in any way you want. It can be really tactical and really gamey. It can be really simulationist, where you're really like, what is it going to be like to be this ragtag band of adventurers trying to get one over on the world, which is what I usually did, or you can play in that kind of really narrative storytelling collaborative thing where your players do kind of like you're kind of plan like what kind of story we're going to have, or give the players, you could like do that. You give the players a ton of agency. And I don't think Ubiquity really promotes a particular kind. I mean, you can certainly play very narratively that I've seen. You can certainly play it more simulationist, which is kind of like and I don't mean by that, I don't mean like simulating wounds, but like simulating like what is it like to be these characters here? What is it like to be Halsey and Shock?
Right. Right.
And I believe you could probably play it tactically. But I think what it has done and what it tends to promote um, is a it doesn't cause more role play than D&D, but I think can promote like role playing a little bit more sometimes, especially when you've got this motivation, you've got this flaw, and you've got this thing where you're going to get some kind of currency for doing that. That helps. Like, I mean, I'm not gonna beat the dead horse, but like, I mean, like, we certainly, got programmed to kill monsters and loot treasure because you got experience for that crap.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, part of getting experience in Ubiquity too, which is kind of neat, is you'll get a point for showing up, like participating. You get a point for especially good role play, just like stepping into your character. And then you get points for things like, where do you feel like you were in danger? Did your character actually learn anything? It's kind of interesting stuff. It's novel. So
yeah. Well, it works. And if you and I, if Runeslinger by chance had said, well, we're going to play some Labyrinth Lord, you guys want to play that game? You and I would have made our characters. We would have rolled into that session. I might have gone in with a character in my head. You might have gone with a character in your head, but I don't think we would have sat down I had already begun to flesh out a character as if I was writing a screenplay. I will say this, the character creation in this and the motivation and archetype being your very first two decisions, you can't help but start thinking about the actual personality and the background of the character before you begin to point by your things, which is how Chuck ended up so narrow-minded, because I was thinking about him being a college athlete and nothing more. He was only 20-something years old, hadn't seen the world, hadn't done anything beyond that. So that is how Chuck got so narrow.
Right.
But you may have not done that. You basically still system mastered it. You looked and said, but I still think he should be more of an adventurer who better have more, flesh out more things. You talked about how you created your character, I think, twice.
Yeah, I've got this guy's
I literally looked at it like writing a character for a screenplay. I literally looked at it like, okay, this is going to be a character. This is how that character is going to have existed, and this is how I'm going to play him. Now, how he evolves, if we were in a campaign, Chuck would evolve, right? He might become a little hardened and a little more irritated with Halsey. We might have more adversarial relationship. He might evolve and get where he likes this money thing, gets more greedy. But that's the great thing about role-playing. We don't know. We don't know how they're going to turn out, right?
Right, exactly.
Cervantes looked all right on paper. Cervantes turned out dead. It wasn't about Cervantes. It was about Dim and Grinch. and you role-played Dim immediately.
Right.
Immediately. You didn't need all that background. You just immediately said Dim is this crazy, dim-witted character that's just going to go on a revenge tour. And you played it. You role-played it. And so that's why I say to people, you can role-play anything. But certainly, and you did. You role-played Dim. It made total sense. Total sense.
Yeah, no, that was fun, and I think for this, I mean, one of the things it's done for me here, at least with this, and trust me, I'm never going to abandon old school games. Is that like with the guy now who I have not picked a name, but like he's I already figured out, like, he's some guy that's done some dirty stuff, and it probably from Australia. I can't figure out if it's Australia or Britain, but probably but just kind of this guy that's like, dude, I'm retired, I don't want to do this crap anymore, but I'm out of money.
Right, and I've got a harem of girls I got to take care of. No, that's a different era. Like, that's a different era.
So, but have I invented the entire character? No, but I've kind of like got this persona, and so I've always done that. I mean, I acted in a couple plays, but that was about it. But I've always kind of like, I enjoyed taking on the persona, or people just daydreaming or coming up with characters, and so. This gives you some words, and you start to think, okay, well, what's this guy really good at? Okay, he's good as he's like, oh yeah, he's intimidating, or like, he's got some demolition stuff, and then you start thinking of all these characters you've seen in movies or read about in books, and next thing you know, he's got an accent, and all right, and then you've got this guy.
Yeah,
and then
that's it. And I'm gonna say this. So what's really the big difference for me for Ubiquity or Hex? I'll say Hex. I haven't seen the other Ubiquity, so I can't speak to those. But I can speak to Hex. It's a rule when they give you characters, playable characters, and in that they give you his background, and then they tell you right here how to role play this character. That to me is a rule. They're basically saying you don't have an option. You're supposed to be role playing in this game. This game, you need to be role playing. D&D, they give you some personality, some flaws, some bonds, but it's really still, you don't have to role play, really. So there is a big difference when you choose to pick this and sit down and make a character play. you're supposed to be thinking about role playing that character, not just going, well, Dim's got a 3 wisdom or 3 intelligence. I guess I'll play him like he's stupid. Well, that's kind of, you know, so I would say that is also a big difference between the writing of this book. I won't call it ubiquity because, again, I haven't seen the other systems, but this book definitely is telling you. And I downloaded all the free.
Right.
I went to Exile Games. I downloaded all the free adventures that were from RPG Free Day or whatever, 2008, and they all have characters that players can play. And every one of them have how to role play that character. So even someone who doesn't understand role playing should be able to pick a character here and make an effort to play this character that way. You know, do you remember those murder mystery games in the 80s?
Yeah.
Right. Everybody would get a thing, and they would be told before the party, come as the Arab, and you would get a thing in the mail that said, oh, you're supposed to play a rich oil Arab or whatever, and it's a murder party. And they would have to come dressed up. You know, that's, you know, I never did it. I was a kid, but my parents did a couple of those, and my brother, and they would all come. They'd role play, basically, is what it was. But they would have to come dressed as these characters, and they'd have to come, and you know, only the killer knew who's the killer. And then, you know, the person there that was the detective would have to figure out who the killer was. They'd all have to play it fairly, solve the mystery. That's kind of what this is saying, right? You got to role play something. If you're going to play the adventurer, you got to role play that kind of thing out, right? In D&D, it doesn't happen that way. I could make a fighter who absolutely has an aversion to blood. He doesn't have to be played like just a fighter. But in this, you definitely are told you need to think about role playing these guys. It doesn't say that anywhere in D&D, at least when you're looking at the classes.
Right.
When you read the dwarf race. Some games may do this, but they don't stop and say, oh, by the way, dwarves are this. They're short, they're cranky, they're greedy, and they're this.
They're Scottish, too, I think, right? They're Scottish?
Right. So I think that's something worth noting. The difference between this game and other games that I have is they actually tell you you should be thinking about role-playing this character. And that, to me, becomes a rule. How does that become a rule? Because not only do I read it, but as a GM, they read it, and then that GM is going to give me style points based on whether I'm following this rule.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So that, you know, when I characterize my character as, you know, as overconfident, you know, if we were playing, you know, Halsey would be getting style points for being overconfident.
Exactly, and you should. You absolutely should. Yeah.
So that's the thing. And so you know, you can role play either. This one tends to promote it. Yeah. So, but I mean, at the end of the day, I think, you know, the original intent of us talking way back when, before we went off on 57 tangents, just, you know, in OSR D&D, I'm not even thinking about it. I'm like, okay, make this roll. Here's your chance. In Ubiquity, I'm like, well, wait a minute. Hey, hold on, guys. You know, and so there's that moment, and like, you know, it's that point where you finally, for me, like, you start to cross over the hump and realize, oh, I know what to call for, or this is cool,
right.
Or, you know, use some kind of investigation. And somebody's like, well, can I use science? I'm like, well, how are you gonna do that? Oh, okay, you know, and so it's getting that fast out with the system. There's another game that you probably sometime I'll have to have you check out Broken Rooms, because that is a stupid simple system.
Okay.
You know, much
What's
less Broken Rooms.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool game.
Okay.
You just have to find the right people to play it. It's a little bit nuts, but it's a cool game. But it's all D12s. There are skills, but it's less of a list than this, and there's less of a it's easier.
Wow, very cool. Well, and that's part of it. Is when I bought this originally, I thought, okay, more player agency. They're going to narrate. I'll give them their setup. I'll give them their challenges. I'll know the mysteries. I'll know the bad guys. I'll know what their motives are, et cetera, like we do. But they're going to tell me how they're going to drive this truck, right? And I'm going to say, well, the difficulty to drive this truck is this. What skill are you going to use? This. To me, it's not. I don't think it's going to be that difficult for me to adjudicate the game on Monday night.
Right.
If indeed it happens Monday night. Again, we're trying to make sure Anthony can make that. If he can't, we'll figure something out. No big deal. But the reality is, that's one of those cases where it's like, yeah, well, if you narrate to me, if you tell me, I'm going to go over and I'm going to pick up the fruit, and I'm going to smell the fruit, and I'm going to cut a piece off the fruit, and I'm going to taste the fruit. I'm assuming you're telling me that you're using your biology, intelligence, something to discern something from that fruit. And then
yeah,
I
no,
I should be able to say, well, I know his biology skills a 6. To determine whether this fruit's poisonous or not, it would be you know, a 3. And then you say to the player, are you attempting to determine whether this is poisonous from these? And then now the difficulty level went from 1, yeah, it tastes good, to 3. How could you tell it's poisonous without killing yourself? Right? I like that flexibility, but that means you got to have players who are taking that player agency, that are willing to narrate in such a way that we just roll. You just follow that. You just go with that. And that's what I loved about the original reading of this, that, wow, I can just take averages. I don't have to roll a die as a DM. Cool. Let you guys roll the dice. I kind of like that. Yeah. I like the fact that, yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, definitely.
So, but I thought the game with you guys the other night was fantastic. I thought we played that pretty good. I mean, I obviously struggled out of the gate with a couple of concepts, and then ultimately I just relaxed and started role playing.
Yeah, I think we nailed it. I
quit worrying about the rules.
Yeah, we nailed it except for those.
I was very ruled.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I said we nailed it except for those cat people. That really kind of screwed us over.
We don't know, Halsey. I still see you as you're going to end up the chieftain of the cat people.
Yeah, you know, either that or my head will be on one of their idols or something. Right. All right. Well, I actually have to get a couple things done today, but be fair, it'd be cool.
Did we actually talk about what we set out to talk about?
A little bit. That's okay. Doesn't matter.
I do have one question.
Oh, what's that?
Unfortunately,
No, that's cool.
We talked about all that before.
Oh, yeah.
So, for instance, perception, because I believe in using perception quietly. If you guys had let's say your character has a perception of 6, and I'm narrating, you enter a room and I'm giving you information, narrating a room to you. Could I just take the average of that for you and fill in those gaps through narration, or would I have to ask you to make a roll?
You know, that's one of those things that I've wondered myself. Like, I suppose you could. I mean, that's a good question for Anthony, but like, you know, that's a pretty. You know, the average person's gonna have a perception of 4. You know, when it boils down to it. So I mean, they're going to be able to notice things that have a 2. You know, so on average, I suppose you could. That's a you know, because I would do that like in OSR D&D, where I'd look at their intelligence, look at their wisdom, and say, okay, this guy's going to notice this kind of stuff. I mean, theoretically, I suppose you could do that. And the guy that has a perception of 5, you make him roll a die, and evens he notices 3s, and odds he notices 2s. But you know, or you could just, you know, I suppose you could adjudicate it a couple different ways.
Yeah, see, because like I said, for passive perception is I guess what you call it.
Right.
I would just use your average. And when I describe to Mike the situation he's in, if his passive perception doesn't beat that mark, I would fail to give him that information. If his perception is high enough, I would just narrate that information smoothly right into the game, and he would hopefully pick up on that information, if that makes sense. But if I have to stop and say, Mike, roll your perception, suddenly everybody goes, oh, wait, there's something to notice here. Right?
Right. Yeah. And I get it. I get what you're saying.
Don't know. You know, the minute you tell people to roll a dice, all of a sudden everybody goes, well, there's something special going on here.
Right.
I'd rather you get it through the narrative experience, right? But that's hard to do. Very, very hard to do. When we're talking about mechanics, it's hard to do.
No, I hear you. And I was always one of those guys with the perceptions and stuff where like I felt comfortable. You know, it's kind of like that thing. Did you hide or not? Did you move silent or not? A lot of times, or were you stealthy or not? I was very comfortable doing that. That was one of the only roles I would make behind the screen, so to speak. It's kind of like, all right, you're not going to know if you pass this or not.
Right.
I suppose. I mean, like in Ubiquity, for the most part, the times I've seen it used, or I've used it, it's like when people are really actively looking for something. Like, okay, now make a perception. It's like making a search roll.
Right.
Like even the old school, like, are you gonna look for secret doors? Better roll a 1, dude. You know.
Right.
You know, so
I think sometimes I create scenarios that may be too subtle, where I don't want to give up that information without them being challenged, but it's not the kind of thing where they're searching the room for the key. You know, it's something that they would observe. Like, you know, think Sherlock Holmes, right? How does Sherlock Holmes ascertain? If you've read much Sherlock Holmes, how does he ascertain when he walks in? He makes observations that Watson didn't even notice. He didn't see the cigarette butt on the other side of the room. that's not because Sherlock needed to be challenged. That's because Sherlock's looking. He actually saw it because of his ability to perceive that without actually getting on his hands and knees and crawling around looking for every little piece of fiber. So I sometimes I think I might create scenarios that are too subtle where we're going to need passive perception, right? In D&D, it's simple. One or two, they'll spot the trap. If not, that somebody's gonna step onto this trap, right? That's easy.
Right.
Right. That's so. But anyway, I know you have to get going. But anyway, I thought that's kind of an interesting dilemma, because I've got a couple of the introductory scenarios that we're going to start with on Monday night for Mike, and then obviously Anthony and Mike, and then Anthony, you and Mike recruiting, as I said before, how we're going to start the game. There are some subtle clues that Mike will get in his introductory that he may or may not get, right?
Right. No,
so maybe but if the minute I say roll your perception, he's going to know I'm missing something if he fails.
Right, and there's things like investigation too, which like the character has an investigation skill. They may be able to use that instead. Because like in the skill list too, like all those little it's because it's not a specialized skill. It's not like academics where you have to pick one.
Right.
Like in investigation, you're good at crimes, enigmas, interview, research, searching. You're good at all of that. It's
right.
if you choose to specialize in one, that means you just add more dice to that one.
Right.
But it could be a case, or it could be a case where it's more like personal, like where somebody's good at empathy.
Yeah. Right.
So
right.
I think it's more than, or if somebody's really, I don't know. I mean, I think you'd have to like really take that case by case. But I think players too, like if might be able to inform you, like, well, how you're looking for this, what are you doing?
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So,
yeah. Not unlike any game we've ever played.
Right. Exactly. I think
how do we?
It's one of those
slide
things. Like so far, like for me, it's as I've become more, I've gotten the system wrap my head more around the system. I felt comfortable making some calls. Like I've seen the four of us in the All for One campaign, each guy make a call a little bit differently, but at the end, did they break the rules? No. Did somebody adjudicate? Say, I don't know if I would have done it that way, but that works. And it's not that different than us playing D&D, where you're like, yeah, I don't know if I'd roll. I don't think I had him roll 2d6 there. I might have him roll percentage dice, but yeah, that works. What the hell,
Yeah, right.
All right.
Right.
So
yeah, exactly. It's the same as long as you have not somehow destroyed the mechanic that adversely affects the character or the game to some degree, right? I don't want to be the guy who ignores the fact that somebody has a pilot skill and the wrong character flies the plane into the ground.
Or I wouldn't let you fly the damn plane, I can tell you that.
That's exactly right. There you go.
Yeah. So, all right, man. Well, I'm gonna get going, but we'll talk soon.
Okay, buddy. Thanks.
Oh, no problem. It's fun.